Wynton, are you ready?
I'm ready.
Okay, with that, I'll turn it over to you.
All right, I want to welcome y'all to our second Skain's Domain, where we discuss issues significant and trivial with the same type of feeling. We're going to talk tonight something called jazz stories. I grew up, my father's a jazz musician, and I would always notice the mysterious thing about them was how they would listen to recordings and know who was playing by their sound. And they would start talking about, oh man, that must be Frog. Or, no man, that's not Frog, that's Jug. And everybody always had a hip nickname. And they would start questioning who was who. And then when the disc jockey would come on and say, that was Gene Ammons. I knew that was Jug. But I also noticed that they used stories to teach you lessons. There were always stories about fantastic musicians, things that they did, occurrences. They taught you history. They taught you how to feel about life. And later when I was older, we would have fantastic hangs at the North Sea Jazz Festival, the Montreux Jazz Festival, Vienna Jazz Festival. All the musicians of all the generations would be together. And we could just sit up and listen to musicians tell stories. I'll never forget one night when I was 18, I was with Art Blakey on a tour of Europe, and all the greatest drummers in the world were there playing some type of festival. There was Max Roach, there was Elvin Jones, there was Buddy Rich, there was Art Blakey, Danny Richmond, just great after great. I just sat up all night listening to them tell fantastic stories. So I'm gonna start us off tonight with a couple of stories. I'm gonna start with a story about the great Sweets Edison. I met him when I was 14 years old, and I used to go to the gigs. It was only gigs for what I thought at that time for old folks, but Sweets was one of the most colorful characters. And when I met him, he had been a member of the legendary Count Basie Orchestra that swung the country into better health during the Great Depression and right on into the swing era. Matter of fact, in the 1950s, on those Columbia sides, Frank Sinatra wouldn't even record without Sweets. He was funny, he was full of down-home wit, and Sweets was a great mentor. His nickname for me was Baby Boy, and he would say in a very country, well, baby boy, it don't sound like you playing too much to me tonight. And he had a way of talking around your deficiencies. For example, he was known for playing just a few notes and getting the most meaning out of them, but I would play a million notes. So he would tell me after I played a solo, he'd say, well, damn, boy, you just played more notes than I played my entire damn career. And the implication was, and didn't play nothing. He thought I sounded too much like Freddie Hubbard and Miles. So he would say, of course, back then, you couldn't imitate people because they might just walk in and catch you stealing their stuff. One time he actually sent me a brand new trumpet, a Selma. It wasn't a new trumpet, but it was a trumpet that he had, a trumpet that he had not played that much, a Selma K modified. And there was a note on the trumpet. It said, maybe this will put some weight on your sound because those long tones don't seem to be working. I once asked Sweets, man, how do you start off your solos with such urgency and just go deeper from there? He said, after you make up your mind, baby boy, there ain't but one way to play. Ain't but one way. So Sweets was a fount of so much information, and we would always go to the same restaurant in Los Angeles called Maurice's Snack and Chat, and he would eat grits and brains, and I was like, man, I don't have nothing to do with any type of organ. Even though you know I'm from the South, I can't handle no brains. And he always had a white Seville or Biarritz Cadillac. He would come pick me up in that Cadillac, and one time, I'll tell you a real extremely soulful story. We were rehearsing with the septet, fantastic septet I had of great musicians. We were rehearsing in the hotel in Los Angeles, and Sweets called me in the morning. I said, man, we having a rehearsal. He said, how many of y'all they got in there? I said, it's the 7, 8 of us with our sound man. Sweets showed up 45 minutes later with 8 breakfasts for all of us, and we sat down and ate with him. I'll tell you another great story about a trumpet player I knew. His name was Surreal. He's a New Orleans trumpeter. We used to play in a big band that would rehearse at the Musicians Union building on a Sunday. And I always hated going to these rehearsals because it meant I had to miss football. But I was in high school, and he called me once. The Surreal called me to play a parade. He said, you got to come meet me on Ferret Street at 1 o'clock, and we're going to do this parade. So I went to do the parade. And when you're playing the parade in New Orleans, you get tired because you're playing constantly, and you're outside. The sound never comes back to you. So when we got out in the parade, I was trying to, I didn't know all the songs. So I would ask Surreal, what key is this in, Surreal? And he would just press his fingers down. Always, trumpet players will know, with an alternate fingering. So if it was the key of G, he would press 1 and 3. If it was something, so I had to figure out scramblers to see what was going on. But as the parade went on, Surreal stopped playing. And he was just being fabulous through the parade, blowing kisses at the people, talking, and all people loved him. And in these parades, we would stop at different bars and different places that people had food for us, like a shrimp po' boy sandwich or something. Surreal had the best food, and he had the people treating him so good. And he would say all the time, they don't do this in New York. They don't do this in Detroit. They don't do this in Los Angeles. So the whole parade, instead of playing, he was talking about they don't do this in, and this was in a kind of period in the 70s when there was always some type of shooting in the parade. And in this parade, sure enough, people start shooting. Boy, we start scrambling down the street, and Surreal was kind of heavy. So he was like trying to keep his belt and his pants and everything on, and we was running down the street looking at each other. We started laughing. He looked at me and said, they don't do this in New York. They don't do this in Los Angeles. So, you have colorful things. I'm gonna tell y'all one more story, and I got some special guest storytellers, and this one is about the great Sarah Vaughan. When I was 21, I had the opportunity to play with her at Boston Symphony Hall. We exchanged pleasantries and salutations in one of the backstage rooms, and I thought I would impress her by playing an obscure Duke Ellington song called "Tonight I Shall Sleep with a Smile Upon My Face." And there was a kind of beat up old piano, and the piece is very sophisticated and has an involved melody and very advanced harmonies. I knew that there was probably not a 21-year-old on the planet who knew this song. And I assumed that ignorance applied to all. So I asked her, Miss Vaughan, do you know this song? Oh, I played it through with very rudimentary piano skills and a few incorrect harmonies on the coda. At that time, of course, I didn't know that she had grown up playing organ in her mother's church, played second piano and organ in Earl Hines' orchestra, had played second piano in Billy Eckstine's orchestra, same one that featured Dizzy Gillespie, Dexter Gordon, Charlie Parker, Gene Ammons, Art Blakey, and she could accompany herself singing very well. She said, wow, that's a great song, Duke, but you played some wrong changes on the coda, baby. Then she sat down and played the complete coda flawlessly and with so much technique. I thought, damn, she plays the piano like that, but is chosen to sing? And she looked at me and said, look, if you want to learn something, you have to learn it all. You learn tunes, figure out how the melody is constructed, then learn the logic and the supporting harmonies. That way you'll never forget the song. You understand the what and the why. She finished making her point by playing the entire song with all kinds of alternate harmonies and elegant improvisational responses to the melody. And she concluded and looked at me and said, you see, baby? I said, yes, ma'am, I see. And she nodded and smiled. So that's my 3 stories I wanted to start off y'all with. And we got some special guests on the line. We have a great Mr. Christian McBride. And I know he's in the rhythm section. I first met Mr. McBride when he was 14. The song he asked me to play, he was playing on the piano, was called Skain's Domain. So I didn't know anybody knew that song. He could play it on the piano. And I've loved him for such a long time. We had a high school orchestra with him in it. He was great then. So I'm so happy to have him join us, and he's just flowered in this time. And I love him and have such a feeling of pride just when I see him. So Mr. Christian McBride.
Well, big brother, it is an honor to be a part of your party this evening. I've loved you from the day I first heard you, and it's hard to believe that's been, I know, right? There's a 3 in the front of that number. That's tricky. Woo.
Right.
But again, thanks for having me, and it's great to be with all of you this evening. I wanted to tell the story that Wynton, you were actually there when this happened. You weren't there in the actual place this happened, but you were in the building. In the fall of 1991, we were quite honored to record an album with the late great Joe Henderson. It was called Lush Life, the music of Billy Strayhorn. And Wynton played trumpet, Stephen Scott played piano, and Greg Hutchinson played drums. And a great story from that session. I remember we recorded on Tuesday, Wednesday, and Friday. And on our Thursday off, Joe Henderson booked a gig in Philly. We played at the Painted Bride in Philadelphia. And he used Greg and myself and a pianist named Junko Onishi. And on our off day, we went to Philly, and we played this gig at the Painted Bride. And after the gig was over, Joe said, McBride, I'll pay you for the gig tomorrow afternoon once we get to the studio. Cool, no problem. And so Greg and I hung out after the gig. We actually almost got into a major car accident on the way back to New York because Greg said, hey man, you got to take me to where they have the ultimate cheesesteak, you know? And so we went and ate cheesesteaks at like 1 o'clock in the morning. And you know, when you eat something that heavy that late at night, you get sleepy. Not supposed to be making a 2-hour drive after you do that. But, you know, we were young and dumb. Thank God we made it. But anyway, we get to the studio the next day and we get halfway through the session. And I said, hey, Joe, is it cool if I get that bread from you from the gig last night? He said, you know, in order to imitate Joe Henderson, you must do this. Because Joe Henderson always wore glasses and he was constantly pushing his glasses up. I said, Joe, can I get that bread from you from last night? He's like, yeah, let's go in the parking lot. So we go out in the parking lot and I said, Joe, I'm sorry I forgot to ask you, but how much did the gig pay? Joe said, well, how much you want? I said, well, how much you offering? I said, well, I give you 200, I give you 250, I give you 3. I said, well, I mean, I think I'd be remiss not to take the bigger number, so give me 300. I said, 300? All right, cool. Reaches in his pocket, pulls out a huge wad of $20 bills, and he starts counting literally like this. 20. How old are you again, McBride? I said, I'm 19. He says, 19? Huh. You know how old I was before I made $300 on my first gig? Man, I don't think I was until my mid-30s, I got 40. And, you know, I think, you know, back when I was playing with Horace Silver, we were probably making $300 a week, and we had to take our own hotels, you know, 60. And, you know, one of these days, McBride, you're going to be a band leader, and you're going to understand that you're going to have all kinds of responsibility, not just for music, but you're going to have to deal with the finances. You're going to have to deal with all this kind of 80. And in fact, now that I think of it, in 1975, I think I got paid. Yeah, that's when I made my first $300 and 100. So the long and short of this story was it took Joe Henderson 1 hour and 5 minutes to count up to 300. Now, I'm convinced that he was he wanted me to like just kind of give up and be like, look, Joe, just give me the 2. Just give me the 250. I'm cool. But I went toe-to-toe with Joe Henderson and I won. I got my $300 and I wound up making 2 more albums with him and a lot more gigs, so it worked out perfectly. But every time I think of Joe Henderson, I remember him counting out that $300 in 65 minutes. That was deep. May Joe Henderson rest in peace.
Yes, may he. I was on a tour with Joe, with Herbie, Ron, and Tony. At the end of the gig, they would play on Broadway. George Benson was on the gig. So then I was maybe 19, but when they would play on Broadway, I would leave. So every night I would walk off the bandstand, and Joe, he did not tell me one word for the whole tour. The last gig we played was in Houston. And he looked over at me and he said he didn't like the way George was introducing him. So he said, because George would introduce him as the very quiet but powerful Mr. Joe Henderson. So he looked at me, there's a whole tour now we play. He looked at me and said, why does he keep introducing me like that? So I was so shocked he told me something because we normally would just stand in the back. I was like, huh? And then when we got near on Broadway, he looked at me and said, are you going to space tonight? I said, yeah, I'm spacing. He said, I'll space if you space. so we both spaced.
Joe Hen, one of a kind.
Yeah, Joe Hen was something, man. I mean, it's just his playing, his sophistication. Lord.
I'm telling you.
You know, them arpeggios Joe always be practicing.
Absolutely.
He was practicing arpeggios up on harmonics and stuff all the time. Then he'd play a solo. And man, it'd be like all kind of harmonic sophistication. And
man, listen, that performance of him playing Lush Life of solo tenor, That's one of the greatest examples of pure virtuosity and imagination and skill and emotion. Everything he played on that performance, particularly, because that's a very deep song, as we all know, and the fact that he chose to play that song unaccompanied saxophone and just absolutely killed it. That's a testament to his greatness.
Oh yeah, he's great. He's great. Very concentrated when he plays too.
Oh,
I'd gone on the road before I played with Joe. Played on a recording with me in 1987 or 88, one of those years. Before I'd gone on the road with Charlie Rouse, and Charlie Rouse was afraid of flying. At that time, I was not afraid of flying. So I'd be, man, you're gonna drive all over the place in the car, and we'd be teasing him kind of. But he told us one night we were playing. We play all the kind of wild stuff with Nasmo King and all of that. He said, man, I hear all that stuff y'all playing, but you ever think that maybe the new thing is in your sound?
Right.
And I thought, wow. And to me, that's how Joe, just his sound.
That's right.
Was evocative of so much. It has such a timeless quality to it.
That's right. That's right. And I can't, it's really hard to say that, a lot of people too easily assert things like Joe Henderson was sort of like a Coltrane clone, or a lot of his ideas came from Coltrane. While that may be true to a large extent, I can think of no other person that has a sound like Joe Henderson. That really is such a singular sound. Right. Nobody else has a sound like that.
Right. And that was one of the sweetest things that he would always say too. If I can't tell you about your sound, you're not playing nothing, baby.
Right.
Your sound is your sound is your business card.
There you go.
And I'm trying to figure out who you are. I don't really know who you are. You got to let me hear you. Hey man, please. Thank you, man. Thank you for coming in, Chris. If you don't have nowhere to go, hang with us, man, in case we get to something. But if you got to go, I love you.
I ain't going nowhere. I'll be right here.
Oh man, great.
I'm chilling.
Veronica is the great Veronica Swift is here. She's the daughter of a jazz musician, so she knows. I'm gonna just turn it over to her and let her break stuff down. She has some great stories to tell.
Hi. Well, I don't have, for me, my stories, most of them happened. I'm actually making new stories now for myself in my early 20s, as a lot of the crazy stories happened in those years. Like you and Christian, y'all have been playing with such amazing musicians and legendary musicians in your 20s. And for me, a lot of my stories that I have to share are actually from my childhood, because that's more so when I was on the road with mom and dad. For those of you who don't know, mom and dad, my mom is Stephanie Nicassian, my father, Hod O'Brien, great late in that order. And they took me on the road with them when I was a kid, and that's how I grew up with this music. And I have a lot of cool stories. One of them actually was with you, Wynton. I know you, I was hoping you would remember, and then we went on the holiday tour. And I said, do you remember? And you said to me, spitting rice. And because when I was blown away in that moment, because I didn't think you'd remember. And then I knew, wow, this guy remembers everything. I better be careful. and when I was 9, I went to Dizzy's for the first time. And that was when I was playing trumpet. I thought I was going to be a trumpet player before any of the singing. And I wanted so badly to meet Wynton. And I guess I forget how I got to meet you. I got to meet him, and he sat me down for a couple minutes, and we were talking about embouchure, and you got to pretend like you're spitting rice, and we were doing a couple of back in the back of Dizzy's, and even when I go there now, it's so nice to remember that moment. So thank you for that, Wynton.
Well, and thank you.
And I actually, when I was growing up, Mom, when I knew I was going to be doing this, I guess jazz singing, it started kind of making its way into my life professionally when I was around the age of, technically I was 9, but really 13 was when I started singing, really deep into the repertoire. And Mom, since she was with John Hendricks on the road for a good number of years in the 80s, she had a lot of access to bootleg recordings and stuff, like old cassettes and stuff she'd show me, and I'd learn a lot of the old vocalese stuff that hasn't been recorded, like Room 608, a lot of other stuff. And I just loved Annie Ross as a kid, and now, and she's always been a hero of mine. And because back then, a lot of the bebop singers were mostly male. It was a male-dominated kind of style of singing. And Annie Ross, Vaughan, there were very few females that did that. And so I loved Annie, how she sounded like a trumpet. And when I was 12, I went to go see Annie at, I think it was Metropolitan Room. And Jim Coleman, my good buddy, he took me and Mom and Dad to the Metropolitan Room. And she was playing with Warren Vacher, who had been on the road with my parents for a bit. So he was always around. And I don't know how it happened, but Annie invited me to come up and sing on her set. This little 12-year-old kid, that was one of the scariest moments of my life. But back, I guess when you're that young, it's scary, but you don't really know the weight of the situation. So you kind of just, I'll do it. What the hell? And I just go up and I went to the band. I said, thank you, Annie. I'm a big fan. And then I said to the band, I said, do you guys know Twisted? Of course, Twisted was one of Annie's most famous lyrics, vocalese lyrics. Of course they knew Twisted. What was I thinking? So I sang Twisted at Annie Ross's show, and I was 12, and we basically hung out the rest of the night. She sat down, and we were having, of course, I had my Shirley Temple, and she had her whatever. And that was probably one of my most amazing moments for me. I was my first time kind of legitimized with some of my heroes, and we've been friends ever since. And she called me one time. She found my number, I guess, through Jim, and she called me, and she left a message. So I get home from a trip, and I hear on the voicemail, "Hi, this is Annie Ross," and she gave me her number, and then she said, "I want to talk about what gowns you have." I was 13. I got no gowns. That was pretty funny. But and Paquito's here. Actually, Paquito, I have a funny story with you. See, most of my stories with you guys, because I'm 25. I have yet to have some really big moments, but there's been some really amazing moments for me. And one of them, I remember, I was maybe 16. Paquito, I don't know if you remember this, but that was my first time meeting you. We were at the Telluride Jazz Festival, which I had been there every year since I was like 10 years old. And Paquito he was the guest of honor that year. And I was part of the Telluride Jazz All-Stars, which was a youth group. A lot of young jazz musicians come up through that group. And I don't know how Paquito, I guess he heard me at the jam session or something. I was, 16, and he heard me scatting, and he was like, "Well, I would love to have you come up and scat on some tunes." And he had us up on his, the big stage, and Paquito D'Rivera, oh my God. And so I went up there with my friend Ben Cruz, a guitar player, and Paquito called All the Things You Are. I was like, okay, yeah, I know those changes. And I was sing the melody and scatted on them. And then halfway through my second chorus, I think Paquito changed the key. And I was like, oh, he's messing with me. I gotta keep my ears open. Of course we're not gonna go through All Things You Are in the same key in the same, time in mark, not 4/4. So he went to different time signatures, and he changed the key signature a bunch, and I had to just keep on. And that was a great learning experience for me. And I guess I hung with it enough that I was in good with Paquito. And I just remember sticking his tongue out on me on stage. And that was really fun. As I tell a lot of my vocalist students and friends, always keep your ears open. Just because you're singing the song doesn't mean someone isn't going to throw something at you. So right. That was a lot of good experiences that taught me a lot, and kind of I was reminded that I'm on the right track. I'm in with the right people. Mm-hmm.
Well, one thing we gotta get used to when we doing these stories on the telephone. We don't have nobody co-signing us. They're not. You need those little cosigns so you feel like you're just talking into empty space. But we hear you. We hear what you're saying. So
thank you.
I noticed one thing that you were talking about Paquito. So I don't know where we are on time. So I want to bring him in there. And I mean, we all love him so much. He's a man with so much integrity and just musical ability. I'm gonna just to let him, if he's on here, I want to, whatever he says is valuable and worth hearing. He has some of the greatest stories you've ever heard. What you talking about, Pac-Man?
Wynton, we're trying to get Paquito in right now.
Okay.
Yeah, let's just give him another 10 seconds or so, and if not, let's go to Jeff, and then we can come back to him.
Okay. Well, we having trouble getting Paquito on. But, you know, I could ask Veronica just one more thing. I noticed we went on tour with her, and she sings songs absolutely differently every night. And she has an unbelievable type of variety. And we had also gone on tour with John Hendricks years ago. He was in his 70s, and he went out and played football with us on a Saturday afternoon. 2 hours he was playing ball. So I just want to ask you, Veronica, about your approach to just how differently you do things. And what is your attitude about just being in the moment and going for your thing?
Well, just like, I mean, you can understand it's something that it's not like a technique or an exercise you can practice, really. It's just going out and doing it as much as you can all the time, and throwing yourself into those situations where you have to do something differently. Like I will constantly sing or pick a tune and say, let's do it in a different key tonight. Let's do it and try to throw it. Like if I am at a jam session, let's do this a fourth away from the key I usually do it. When back when I was going to jam sessions more often, I would do that to try to see if I would sing it differently. But also just emotionally, your life changes. And I had a lot of things happen to me, even in just the past 8 years, that have really changed my perspective on tunes. And I sing tunes differently because I would think about the different times I would sing them differently. You know, whether I was like, You Don't Know What Love Is. I used to sing it all spiteful and angry and fast. And now I'm like, well, I've gone through something else that I might sing it slower or, much messing around with back phrasing and front phrasing that'll evoke a different emotion. Just looking at, like, I had gone through I had a house actually I had lost a house to a fire right when I went to college. And that piano in the house was my mom's piano. My grandfather gave to her, and it was like a Steinway B Grand from 1962. Very special piano. And they saved it. And once that happened, like, the concept of home changed. And there are different things, that love, home, family, all this stuff changes throughout your life. And you have to constantly go back to all these tunes you've been playing for some people decades, I guess. And what do I know? I'm only 25, but even now I'm seeing changes. So being in a moment like that, yeah.
Yeah, I mean that's especially good for right now, because we're all in situations we're not normally in, even with our families. Exactly. So we discover a lot of new things. Well, somebody who knows about that is Paquito, because he left the where he grew up and he came here. So do we have Paquito now? Are we able to hear him? Or?
I don't think he's in yet, but let's try one more time.
Well, you know what? We have another person who's going to come in here, and this is one of the funniest people in the world. I have the honor of sitting next to him when we judged the Essentially Ellington Jazz Band Festival and Competition. He is a fount of knowledge. He's one of the most generous, just open-hearted, kindest people, and just an absolute pleasure to be around, and a fantastic musician. Let's hear from Jeff Hamilton.
Hey, so you think I'm funny, do you?
Yeah, man, you're funny. You're the hammer, man. Come on.
It's nice to be here. I'm sorry it took me a minute to figure this out. I am a Zoom rookie, if you will, so I apologize for that, but I'm glad to be on. And hi, Veronica, nice to hear your stories as well. I missed Christian's story. I'm probably better off because I know he was talking about me like a dog, so I'll catch up about him later on. But I did hear your story about Sweets Edison and his white Cadillac, and the color white struck me funny in a different way, because as we know, Sweets had all of these great sayings that that just have lived on in all of our hearts, of all of us who knew him. And on his 80th birthday in Paris, we were with the Philip Morris Super Band with Gene Harris and James Moody and Ray Brown and the great band, all-star band. And on his birthday, he had a white suit on and was dapper as always, as you remember. And Jeff Clayton, who had been taking a lot of teasing, we should keep Jeff in our thoughts also for better health. And he was being funny, acting nervous, trying to get the first piece of birthday cake that Sweets was cutting for himself. So we're all lined up after the rehearsal and a sound check, and it was a surprise. And Sweets takes the knife and he cuts this beautiful piece of cake, and he gets it over, and Jeff Clayton is shaking with the plate in front of Sweets like this, yet like, hurry, I'm hungry. And Sweets puts the cake on the plate, and the plate falls face down on Sweets' white pants of his and you could have a pin drop in that room. The air went out of the room, and all of a sudden you hear Sweets say, I was going to give you the first piece of cake, but you was standing there shaking like a dog trying to pass a peach pit. so the white Cadillac, the white suit, they all go together.
Right.
Man,
come on, you got so many of them.
All right, so more Sweets. Yeah, well, Sweets was.
It don't have to be Sweets. You can give us whatever. You got plenty of them.
All right. I think one of my fondest memories, as you know, food is very important to many musicians on the road, and where you're going to eat is usually the first knowledgeable part of the itinerary. You have your restaurants where you're going, and where are you guys playing tonight? Well, I'm not sure, but I know where we're eating after the gig. So this was true also with Oscar Peterson's group when I was in the band from 90 to 95 with Ray Brown and Herbie Ellis. And my first dinner was quite an ordeal. Like, here I am with these guys. This is unbelievable. And I mean, I wasn't a kid, but I was in my early 30s, and still I'm in the presence of greatness. So we get to this private dining room. Oscar had been told by Norman Grant's, gourmet restaurant. We show up, and we're in our tuxedos from the limo to from the concert hall to the private dining room, and Oscar's sitting across from me, and Ray's to Oscar's right, and then I'm next, and then Herbie is next to me. Waiter says, Dr. Peterson, what may I get you? And he said, this is in France. He says, what may I get you? He said, I'd like the 24-ounce bone-in steak with I'll start with the full Caesar salad, and I'll have the potatoes lyonnaise. I'll start with the French onion soup. Let's do that. And the potatoes lyonnaise and a side of asparagus. And I see it takes 20 minutes for the chocolate souffle. So, I'll have a chocolate souffle. And I had just dropped about 25 pounds playing tennis and working out and trying to get healthy. It goes to Ray, and the waiter says, and you, sir? Yeah, I'll have the French onion soup too, and the Caesar salad, and I'll have the double cut pork chops, and I'll have the asparagus, and I'll have one of those souffles too. That sounds good. Waiter comes around to me and says, and you, sir? And I said, I would like the chicken Caesar salad, please. And Oscar leans over to Ray and he says, I guess your boy doesn't want to be in the band too much longer, does he? And then I said, and I'd like the 24-ounce bone-in steak, please. So these are just some of the things that happen on the road that as you know, get into the music as well. You get on the bandstand and you see these little grins and raises of people's eyebrows, and you're remembering these stories, as you know.
Right. Hey, Hammer.
Hey, how you doing?
What's up, man?
Did you tell the story that I was going to tell too about us playing together?
Well, I was going to suggest that you tell them that story, our German saga.
I'll let you finish it. But we were both asked to be in Berlin for Alan Bergman. Alan and Marilyn Bergman, the great lyricist, and Alan was going to sing a whole LP of their composition, their songs that they had written lyrics to. And so they flew Christian McBride and I over from the United States to be in the rhythm section. It was an all-German orchestra, excellent orchestra. Young Till Brunner was on that. Do you remember, Christian?
Yep.
And we played what was it, 3 days of ballads, you know, windmills of your mind, and, you know, all these lovely songs. And we're going, man, this is beautiful. But can we get a coffee? You know, I mean, it was just one after the other. And so Christian had to get back to the United States on the 4th day. So he splits, and they bring in a very talented German bass player. He's still one of my favorite bass players. But the first tempo they counted off was, "Let's take it nice and easy." And I looked at him like, why didn't you do this when McBride was here? and every time that we played together, we did one hit with Diana Krall, and it was mostly a ballad night. And we just kept looking at each other like,
we're cursed.
Are we doing something wrong, man?
Right.
You know? Now, fast forward to the recent jazz cruise, and I'll let you take over, Christian.
Oh, hey, man, look, my suit now just got dry after all that sweating we did on that cruise. Playing hard, man. We had so much fun, man. I mean, I don't think we played any ballads on the cruise, did we? We wanted to make sure we buried that curse.
That's right. Neither one of us would have let that happen.
That's right.
I remember there's this interview with Miles. I don't know if it's on YouTube or not, but it was in the 70s, so he wasn't doing a lot of, you know, ballads and swing stuff. But I remember, I forget where I saw this, but someone asked Miles, why don't you play ballads anymore? And Miles goes, because I like playing ballads too much.
Right.
Yeah.
I thought that was something crazy. Wow, I've never thought of it that way.
We always loved playing ballads, but not for 3 straight days.
Well, I always try to have a lot of variety.
Yeah, I'm telling you, Joey DeFrancesco wanted to do a trio set with Christian and with me on the cruise, and we said, yeah, you know. I thought, well, that's weird because Joey playing the Hammond B3. Why does he want to use a bass player, even if it is Christian? You know, I said, okay, well, let's do that. So, like the day before, it's like, oh no, I'm going to play piano. I'm not going to play organ. You know, so we said, well, okay, and boy, did Joey stomp all over it, didn't he, Christian?
He killed it. Well,
great.
As Wynton knows, he was there. Like that's how most of us came to know Joey in the early days. Was as a pianist.
That's right.
Okay.
That's right.
And
too, right when he was like a teenager.
I knew he played the organ, but you know, you obviously, you know, I don't think there's any public high school in the world that has a Hammond B3 in their music. But yeah, Joey's always been that freaky, talented guy.
Yeah,
right.
It's great to hear him play piano again.
If he would have called a ballad that night on the cruise, it would have been "Man Overboard."
Right.
That's right. That's right.
All right, guys, I've got Paquito here, so let's add him into the mix.
All right.
Hi, Paquito.
Pac-Man.
Oh.
Let's see. I see him.
Paquito had a great cruise event too. We hit some pretty heavy water one year, and he was on the stage. And I don't know if he'll tell that story or not, but the audience was in stitches when that happened. If he's around.
I don't want to think about it. Oh.
We got him.
Well, I thought we did.
Okay, what we're gonna do is we're gonna tell another story. I'll tell another story. Thank you, Hammer. Thank you, Christian. Thank you, Veronica. And then we're gonna open it up for you all. If you have questions, you want to hear a story. If you have a good story, you can briefly tell. I'm gonna just conclude talking about how you doing. I can see you now, Paquito. Can you be heard?
1, 2, 3. Can you hear me there? Can you hear me there?
Great. We got you.
Maybe the machine thinks I am speaking Spanish or something. Can you hear me there?
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
Yes. Hear you.
You hear me there?
Yes.
Very good. You say something about Telluride. I love that place.
It's fun, right? Beautiful.
It's a little too high for my taste, you know. It's a very high altitude, so I have to breathe two or three times to play a phrase. Mm-hmm. It's a little uncomfortable. It's a nice place to play.
So what good story you got for us, Paquito?
Huh?
What good story? You got plenty of stories, man. Every time I see you telling good ones. Give us a good story.
You know that dime una historia. Pero hoy
encontraste la música que habías perdido.
Yo no sé qué está hablando.
Con Daniel Freiberg.
No.
Que te ayudó.
Oye, I hear you like you are playing a piano in a story.
Right. Uh-huh.
I can hear very, very, very badly.
Well, just tell us a story. You don't have to hear us. We can hear you.
No me acuerdo de ninguna historia. Oh, can you hear me there?
Yes. We can hear you.
Okay. You want to hear an story? I was playing very many years ago with a friend of mine who played the bass. I was supposed to do a duet with him. His name is Bobby Carcassés. Probably you met him in Cuba. He's a singer and dancer and do every type of thing. He's a painter also. And then almost ready to leave to the venue, this friend of us came with a tenor saxophone. And he said, I was given this saxophone. I said, oh, but I didn't know you played the saxophone. He said, well, I will try. Can I go with you? Yeah, of course. Where are you going? No, we're going to this school in very close to Tropicana. It's a school that they're celebrating something there. So we went there. Bobby came with the bass, and I have maybe my alto and all that. And there was a guy who approached us. And Bobby played a couple of things, and then this guy come to us and say, "Can you play And I Love Her?" This song by the Beatles, you know. And I love her, right? Everybody knows that song. And Bobby say, yeah. I know. I remember that the bass was like, boom, 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 boom. And then you play the melody, boom, 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 boom. Boom, bum, bum, bum. And then Anselmo was the friend of the friend with the saxophone. He was struggling putting together the saxophone because he never put together the saxophone before in his life. So finally he got put the reed and everything. And then Bobby did pom, 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 pom. And Anselmo started playing something like boom, 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 boom. Boom, bum, bum, bum. Then 10 minutes of that, and at the end of the song, the guy.
Uh-oh.
Oh, I think we lost him for a second.
Well,
let's give him a minute to reset here.
It was going good to that point. I want to hear the end of it now.
Mira, now I froze.
Okay, we get you on. Go ahead.
Very good. You know, this technology for me is something terrible.
That is good. So Paquito, so tell us, he was playing blah, 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 and then Bobby said, what happened?
No, you know, the guy didn't know how to play the saxophone. He was trying to do some type of free jazz or something. I don't know. But boom, 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 boom. He played all that for 10 minutes. And then probably the guy was waiting for the melody. And then when we stopped playing, the guy came again and said, can you play now? And I love her. Those are the things that happen to us, you know, during this crazy business of ours.
So thank you, Paquito. We're gonna get you back. We're gonna have our technology hooked up a little better. Thank you very much.
It's terrible. Tell Christian that we have to compose a piece together for the New Jersey Symphony. We have to talk about that, Chris.
That's correct.
It's going to be a lot of fun. That guy is a monster horn player.
Yes, he is. Let's get together and work that out, man.
Very good. Let's get in touch to see what are you writing in order to do some type of contrast. You know, I am writing a section called Dali in the Tropics. So let's talk about it.
Okay.
All right.
All right.
Sounds good, my brother.
Okay.
Well, y'all got a lot of time. That's one thing for sure.
Exactly.
Tell me about it.
Right.
We got a lot of time out here. So I'm gonna end with one quick story about my father, and then when he was our high school teacher. So the first day of class, he would get 4 kids to stand up and stand in the middle of the room, and we would all stand back to back. And then he would say, "Describe what you're seeing." So each person, the person facing the window, say, "Oh, I see windows." Another person say, "Oh, I see a clock, and I see a." If we put everything that y'all see together, there's still a lot more of this room that none of y'all saw.
Right.
So I want you to open your understanding up. And he used to always say that he believes in everybody's right to choose, and he celebrates the courage required to actually make a choice. He say talking about something is different from choosing it. Once you choose it, you get everything that comes with it. And a lot of that everything only shows up after you've chosen. Another one was, are you talking? Are you talking about doing? Or are you doing? And he really hated critical talk. Like if your only authority was your mouth, if you're too hard on a ball player or something, or even on a meal, he would say, "Son, the best form of criticism is demonstration. I've seen you play ball, or what have you ever cooked?" So I just want to shout him out. And I always got to recognize and remember the first time I heard about Paquito was from my father in the early 70s, listening to Irakere, talking about how great the band was when nobody, we didn't even weren't aware of that kind of music at all. So I want to thank y'all for checking out our stories and all our special guest musicians. Fantastic. Hammer, thank you. Christian, Veronica, Paquito, thank you so much. And now we're gonna go over to Adam, and we're gonna, if y'all have any questions, or I don't know how much time we have, but
yeah, we've got another 20, 25 minutes, something like that. So let's start taking some questions.
Great.
Hope I get to see everyone before it's, before the end of the year at least.
Have mercy. Let's pray.
Right.
Yeah.
All right. First question is from Hugo Dart. And Hugo, you ready to go?
Yes, sir. Thank you very much. It's an honor to be here, Wynton, with you and all your amazing guests. And it's wonderful to see you again. The first time I saw you was in 2002, and I can prove it.
Don't show that to the Hammer, man. I'm not gonna live that down.
Well, there you go.
Wait, where are my glasses? Where are my glasses?
And you had just given a talk about Art Blakey. It was amazing. And then there was a concert of the Jesuit Contemporary Orchestra the next day, and it was just fantastic. And I'm so grateful I got to see you. And I got to see Branford here. I'm in Rio de Janeiro, Brazil. Last year I got to see Branford here. A few years ago I got to see Delphio here. And 6 years ago I got to see Jason and your father at the Snug Harbor. So big fan of the whole family. And what I'd like to say is towards the end of the first session of these conversations you had about a week ago, one of the last questions was about your role as an educator. And I've always admired you enormously as of course a musician. You've been my favorite musician for as long as I can remember. But your role as an educator, and I know that a lot of people say that about you and highlight your role as a music educator. But I'm an English teacher here in Brazil, and I don't know how aware you are of what a big influence you are in education as a whole. In 2012, I heard you talking to it was your speech at the Band Director Academy, and you were talking about the 12 principles of jazz. And I was so amazed by that. I actually created the talk that I delivered at the Conference of English Teachers, relating the principles, the 12 principles of jazz to principles of language teaching. And I've been doing that, and I've been following you ever since. And always quoting you, something that I'll never forget, and I often quote, is when you say, we all want to embrace one another, and we just don't know how, and the answer is not more education, but more substantive and more culturally based education. So something that was said about a week ago is how wonderful it would be if we could somehow collect these lectures, these talks that you have given, because you actually have so much to say, not only in terms of music education, but education as a whole. And I'm so indebted to you, as I'm sure many, many people are, for your role as an educator. Again, not only related to music. And I'm deeply, deeply thankful to you for that. Now, I know I should ask a question, so here it is. Considering the different times we're living in and how so much of education is now moving online forcefully because of the situation. I'm now starting teaching classes online full-time tomorrow, and many, many people are because of the pandemic. Do you think that that's going to have a more profound impact in the role of music as well, as all of you are also having to communicate and collaborate so much online and from a distance, at least for some time? Will that have a big effect, do you think, in the world of music as well?
Okay, I think I'm gonna give a brief answer, and if Hammer, Christian, Veronica, anybody wants to talk, Paquito, I think it's gonna have a big impact for the better. I think that we realize something about the world, how close we are. We're musicians, so we have a chance to be in Rio and to be all over the world and meet people. I embrace, even though I'm inept with technology, I embrace the technology. I think it's made the world a better place. We can come closer together. The question is not the technology is just a tool, it's how do we use it? So I'm glad to have the opportunity to talk to you over line with everybody else. We're all listening and talking. I'm glad to see Paquito. I'm glad to see Christian. And even though we've known each other for many years, we don't have video calls. And this situation has forced us to embrace each other with another type of depth and feeling. I think this is a tremendous a tremendous tool for education. And if we think about all the scientists that are working on solving the problem with this virus, think about how they're using technology to come together and how it's stretching across borders so that when there's finally a solution to it, this technology is going to make it much more possible. And I think we should not confuse the abuse of a tool with the tool itself. Like when people first started taking photographs, every photograph they saw was of somebody nude. So people's conclusion was photography is not good. It's just how it was being used. So I love this as a tool, and it's great for education.
I think so too.
Yeah.
I think it's important to use what we have in order to educate people. And I remember once talking about the correct use of things, the correct use of advance. Once you say a phrase that stay with me until today, when you say microphones are created to embellish the music, not to cover it.
Right.
And this, because when I wrote an article about the excess volume recently. I have two or three of them. I'm right, because microphone was a great invention, the same way that technology is a great invention, but you have to use it wisely, because if not, technology will absorb yourself, and you spend too much time on it. You have to use it in a way that they can be helpful for you and for the education of others. It's what I think is important to have in mind. Like everything in life, that's what it is. To use it with moderation and in the correct way.
I agree. And I also think that we have to look at it as a way of exposure, perhaps, to the education of the music student or the music listener. But the serious musician or the serious music student, to me, still has to sit next to a master and see them in action and know how they change from sticks to brushes subtly, to see how the drums are tuned, to see the ins and outs of learning right there on the job to see how to do it, instead of a lot of times you can't get that just from watching a screen. So I think that's good to a certain point, but if you're going to be serious about it, I think you have to be sitting next to a mentor at some point.
6 feet distance.
That's right.
Right.
Right. True.
All right. Thank you, Hugo, for your question.
Thank you.
All right. Let's see. Next up, we've got Andrew Tillman. Andrew, go ahead.
Thanks for having me, Wynton, and it's great getting to hear you guys' stories and everything y'all have to say. But I had 2 questions, kind of gonna try to kill 2 birds with 1 stone here.
Mhm.
But I've been trained as a jazz musician. I'm only in high school. I'm only 17, but I feel like I've never played classical. Do you need to play classical to be a really good jazz musician? Because that's kind of the vibe I'm getting down here. And I'm from Alabama, and I don't know if that's right or not, but I'd just love to hear your take on that.
Okay, you don't need to do another thing to learn how to do the thing you're trying to do. It helps the more things you know. I had a great teacher who lived in Alabama, a great Big John McElroy in high school. So I want to shout him out in Alabama and in Birmingham. When I was in high school, he was my teacher. If you want to learn how to do something, study that thing. But it never hurts to have more education, and don't feel like you need to make a choice. Human beings, we add knowledge, and there's things that we all learn from each other. And the more you know, the more you know. But to be good at a thing, you need to know how to do that thing. And I think the Hammer pointed out when he talked about how you have to be next to it and close to it and look at it and see it, and you have to love it. And like people, all music is connected. It's just a matter of you learning enough to start connecting those dots. But I don't want you to feel any negative about learning stuff. There's no negative about learning. Even stuff you don't like, if you learn about it, you can make a more intelligent decision. And that's really how my daddy was with teaching too. He hated you to call any group of people they. If you start saying they too much, he say, hey man, who is they? Do you know them? Have you met them?
You're right.
But who are they?
Yeah.
So I encourage you to study. But I mean, Christian, he could answer it. I met him. He was playing all kind of music. He went to Juilliard. I mean, he does. What you think, Christian?
Well, I was just going to jump in and say that if the word classical itself means timeless and will always be valid no matter what time frame we're in, then jazz is classical. Always remember that Thelonious Monk's music is going to be great 100 years from now. It's classical music. You know what I mean? Now, I think that what that question usually means is, does one need to be trained in symphonic or like European symphony music to be a better jazz musician? Just like Wynton said, it certainly won't harm you, but I surely don't think that is a prerequisite on becoming a better jazz musician.
Right.
I was at Indiana University in a percussion major and was studying timpani with the great George Gaber. And I wanted to play drum set, and I was ready to get on the road, and I left after 2 years. And my first night on the new Tommy Dorsey band, I'm playing Opus 1, and I'm looking over at the ride cymbal. I'm swinging. I said, yeah, that's enough of school and the classical education and all that. And man, I'm swinging. And I kept looking at my right hand, and I said, and this is the timpani grip that Dr. Gaber showed me how to play timpani. So it's all connected, whether we're aware of it or not. It's all connected, and it can be helpful for you.
And from a vocalist perspective too, like the actual the technicalities of the instrument, a lot of questions I get when I'm with schools and whatnot, they say, how do you have such pitch precision and when you jump intervals? And I say, for me, that was when I was a kid. I was obsessed with Bobby McFerrin. So what did he do? He would sing these Bach preludes. And I was like, how do you sing that? And so just, singing that stuff, when I was playing on piano and I would then just sing it, I was able to apply that to my jazz education. And also with just like, I'm obsessed with opera. I sang opera for many years. For vocalists out there listening, you know, I was obsessed with the stories that were in these operas, you know, such intricacies and drama that I was then able to apply to jazz. And it's always, you know, they're constantly informing each other.
Right.
So.
And Bobby's daddy was an opera singer. And Bobby, like Joe Henderson, when you be around Bobby, because we were real good friends from when we were, you know, young in the 20s, he would be, ooh, 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 ooh. He'd be practicing these intervals constantly. And you'd be like, man, what are you working on? So then after some years passed, you realize what he was doing. But yeah, I got to go with the hammer. Another thing is, I'm not a fan of all this kind of wanting to denigrate classical music. And you got to realize that, you know, the composers like Shostakovich and Beethoven, Stravinsky, Schoenberg, the level of sacrifice that they had for music. And they also did not say, we want to take our music to elevate a group over other people. That wasn't their philosophy. The music cost them too much. And if they were here and you could meet them and talk with them, they'd be just as soulful as the hammer. And Veronica, Christian, what we're talking about, Paquito. And Paquito plays fantastic any style of music. So we don't in this era, we really don't have to discriminate, but it's hard to learn now. I'm gonna just tell you this. When you get to these
learning is always great. Learning is very important all the time. Always I say that there is a division between what they call the jazz education and the music and the classical music education. We ignore each sides, and that's a mistake because, for example, classical musicians are missing the freshness, the youth of jazz music. On the other side, jazz people that don't want to listen to the other side, they are missing centuries of music education, composer, intonation.
Hello.
As a saxophone player. Yeah.
Exaggerated volume and staccato. You know, I just wrote a book about articulation. In jazz music, too many people try to ignore, and I mentioned Wynton in this conversation the other day. I say, I love the way that people like Claudio Roditi or Wynton Marsalis or Woody Shaw play, because I can hear the articulation in the playing. Too many jazz players, they used to play everything legato and sound like. And what about some ta 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 ta? What about some staccato? The other day I went with a big band, a guy who played beautiful in the style of Ben Webster, things like that. And then I wrote a tango. I wrote an arrangement. Pedro Giraudo wrote an arrangement of the famous Libertango by Astor Piazzolla. And the saxophones have this figure. Para pa pira piri, para pa para para. And the guy started playing. No. Staccato. Well, there was no way that the guy played like that. Why? Because they have been ignoring the staccato that you learn in the book by Croseo Cavallini. I think it's important to know different styles of music. And on the other side, sometimes you go to a symphony orchestra and they play Stravinsky with so much ease. And then when you write a syncopation like pari pa 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 ay ay ay, you can spend the entire morning trying to do that. So what I mean is that it's important to know a whole spectrum of different styles of music in order to be a better musician, a better artist.
Sure. To
learn from each other. It's that we have been doing all my life.
Right. You definitely are an example of it in the unbelievable range and clarity of your playing. But also, I want to say that the modern symphonic musicians don't have any of this kind of prejudice like what it was years ago. I mean,
that's right.
They're unbelievably collegial. I work with symphonic orchestras, St. Louis Symphony, Philadelphia Orchestra. I just love them. And the orchestras are just as beautiful and filled with people who want to know about music and study and play, and they're unbelievably serious about being for real. So, you know, we still have a ways to go. But if I was you, you're 17, learn how to play all this stuff. But whatever you like to play, play that. If you want to play jazz, play that. If you like to play classical music, play it. If you don't like to play it, don't play it.
And I think a lot of it is I just need to find like a little more of a balance, because I've only ever played jazz. So maybe throw in some elements of classical so you can get more of that intonation and control.
Get your Auburn's book out. Get your Auburn's book out and do those 150 art of phrasing. I gotta quote my brother. I gotta quote my brother Ryan Kaiser. He always says, "Less Facebook and more Auburn's book."
All right. Thanks, Andrew, for your question.
Thank you.
Thank you,
from
brother.
y'all.
Yeah, you're right. Alabama.
All right, guys. We've got time for just one more. Before I get to that, just want to remind everybody that we've got a pretty amazing lineup of live events that we'll be hosting throughout the coming days and weeks. We'll have question and answer sessions with Wynton and special guests, master classes, and conversations with members of the Jazz at Lincoln Center Orchestra, live performances, free education classes. So keep an eye out for all that. Our last question will be coming from Uni Mojica. Uni, you're unmuted. Go ahead.
That's a good name.
What up, Uni?
Uni Mujica.
Uni, can you hear us?
Don't waste that good name, Uni. Come on.
I can see her here. Hold on. Let's try this one more time. Well, oh wait.
Okay.
Yeah.
Can you hear me?
You there, Uni? Okay, great.
Hey.
All right, go ahead, Uni. You're here.
Okay. Hey, everyone. Thanks
Hello.
for taking the time. I'll make my question pretty brief. One thing that I really love about the music is how it's included multidisciplines between dancers and comedians and poets and things like that. And I'd love to hear your guys' stories that you've experienced with people from other artists from other disciplines, and how they have changed or affected your playing and your writing and things of that nature.
Well, I'm going to make Wynton laugh on this one, being a drummer. And if you've seen what I look like, especially, you'll find this humorous. I was asked several times until about, 5 or 6 years ago, if I ever danced professionally, that I looked like I could be a ballet dancer. Okay, our time is up, Uni, so thank you for calling. I think the motions, the graceful motions of the brushes and the lateral motion from the cymbals and around the drum set, I think the flow of what I do is what prompted those kind of questions. But I did get asked that quite often, especially in earlier years. But I think it's all connected. It's all rhythm. Dancers of course with time. Carl Sandburg was just celebrated by Matt Wilson's group. Poetry. I mean, it's all creative, and I think we're all connected somehow. But usually, the rhythm, I think, is usually the connector.
Amen.
Right.
Yes, sir.
Uni, I wanted to say that I think there have been so many great artists from across so many different disciplines, and Jeff is absolutely right. It's the rhythm that connects all of us together. Be it a poet, be it a dancer, be it a comedian, there's a rhythm, there's a timing that I think has deeply influenced all of us on this Zoom tonight. I got to tell you, for my entire childhood, for every third or fourth record in the house, we had like 2 R&B records, a jazz album, and then a comedy album. So my whole life was James Brown, Coltrane, and Flip Wilson. You know what I mean? So all 3 of those people have played a major part in my upbringing. And then later on, when I got to start playing with people like Amiri Baraka and the great Sonia Sanchez, who is actually on my new CD, to hear how they put those things together, their words and their rhythm, and how they create their poetry. It's a direct influence.
Right.
And not just the rhythm. I mean, for me, it's rhythm in the storytelling. You know, whether you, just like right here, what are we doing? We're telling stories. As a musician, whether you're a musician or actor or a filmmaker or photographer, you're trying to convey a story. And it's the marriage between those two that connect all of these different mediums. And,
right.
And I mean, before I was even singing, I remember I was always writing novels and scripts. And actually right now I'm working on a film. And I think that a lot of musicians and artists feel pressured if you're doing kind of one thing to be like, you know, that's what you do. And if that's all you want to do, that's fine. But if you feel like you're being limited and you want to do other things, that shouldn't be, you know, you shouldn't feel limited, and you should always feel like you can express yourself in these different mediums. And I think a lot of, because of the you know, it's important to brand yourself and all that stuff too. But I think one thing I remember when we had talked that one time about you were encouraging me to write. Do you write articles? Do you write? You know, and I was able to then reconnect with my childhood again. Like, oh, maybe I should write more. And I think it's important to, you know,
right.
Collaborate with other types of artists, not just musicians, because you'll be inspired to, you know, tap into that.
Right.
In my case, it's very inspiring when I have to write something. If somebody give me lyrics, the pen goes faster. You know, a good poem inspires me to write the melody immediately. Otherwise, I have to think about what I am going to write. When I have the lyrics, the half of the melody or whatever, the half of the music is written already. It's very inspiring. The same thing happened with dancers, improvising with dancers, people that can dance to you, sometimes even solo. People that can improvise on your playing while you improvise on the steps they do. You know, since I was a little kid, I feel that all arts are interrelated. It's what you call a cross-pollination. Mm-hmm. Hey, you see, I learned a new word in English, right?
Right.
Maybe they don't deport me that now.
You know, I've been lucky in my time out here playing. First, I was mentored by a lot of artists. Romare Bearden, unbelievable artist. When I first met him, I didn't know anything about it. He told me learn mythology. Ralph Ellison, go up to his house and he just found of information. Fantastic. Right, August Wilson and I, once we walked all the way from the village all the way up into the heart of Harlem, talking the entire time just about art and Shakespeare and plays. Garth Fagan, I did ballets with him. He's just unbelievable teacher and educator. Showed me so much stuff.
Yeah.
Alvin Ailey, had the opportunity to be around him and see what he was talking about. Did a piece with Maya Angelou. Once again, just all kinds of education. I love William Butler Yeats, the Irish poet, and Matisse, the French artist. And I'm gonna end by telling y'all a story about Richard Pryor. In 1985, I was called to write music for the semi-autobiographical Richard Pryor movie called JoJo, Dance of Your Life is called. Well, back then I'd never written music for a movie, and I wasn't even known as a composer. So I thought, why was he calling me? But because it was Richard and I grew up loving him, I said I would try. Well, the movie was complicated when I saw it. It had all kinds of flashbacks and different scenarios. It required a deep knowledge and a broad range of understanding of American music. It was beyond what I knew at that time. And scoring the movie was going to require a skill set far beyond my ability. Considering that this was also Richard's debut as a director, there was no way in the world I could agree to mess up this man's movie with an inappropriate score. So I went out to Los Angeles to meet him. Now, his house was set back behind a huge gate with lights all around it. And in the foyer, he had a white piano and a piece of classical music displayed on the piano stand. It looked like nobody had ever played it. We sat down and talked about music and his love of jazz. He said he had opened for Miles back in the day and actually lived in Miles's brownstone for a while. So he talked about all the comedians and how the jazz musicians shared the same fundamental values of improvisation, in the moment timing, and making stark realities and plain truths digestible. One thing I want to say about him was how intelligent he was. What I always noticed about jazz musicians since I was a kid, just the depth of intelligence of Dizzy or Miles. So Richard Pryor was exactly like that, talking about history and what he needed to know. Now, after some conversation about New Orleans and how wild the population was, we got down to talking about the movie. I told him, man, I don't think I know enough to do a credible job of this. So I started to explain it. And he listened to me and he said, how old are you? I said, 24. He looked at me with a straight face and said, man, when I was 24, I wasn't turning down shit. We laughed, and that was basically it. You know, the music came out later. I think Herbie wrote the music for us. But I never forget, he told you he was very patient. So we want to thank y'all, you know, for tuning in to Skain's Domain. We're going to be back, and we discuss significant and trivial things with gusto. Everybody who came with us, thank you for staying with us. And to all my special guests, I love every one of y'all. You're some of the greatest musicians in the world and human beings. Till we meet again.
Thank
Take
you.
care.
Thank you, Vincent.
Yes, indeed. The Hammer. Christian. Veronica. Pac-Man.